It's no secret that the work of H.P. Lovecraft is difficult to adapt, mainly because it has to do with things that are indescribable, things that we can't comprehend, things that are beyond human comprehension, and it also plays on our fear of the unknown, our fear of what lies beyond, be it in space or somewhere underground, somewhere under the ocean, where humans have not been to, some unknown place that we've never been, we've never seen before, harboring unknown creatures that we can't even imagine, and just imagining it would drive somebody crazy. A lot of these things are fairly typical of the work of H.P. Lovecraft, somebody stumbling upon some place that has been unknown to humans for centuries, or for as long as humans have even existed, some creature that just is lurking beyond or just right under our noses, just waiting to come up and kill all of us, or just destroy humanity as a whole. This concept is basically indicative of everything you're probably going to read by H.P. Lovecraft. There are some exceptions to that, but many of his stories do involve a lot of these people finding these things and just going mad, going insane because of the sheer knowledge of it, because they can't understand and they can't deal with just knowing that these things exist. And I feel like that kind of horror, the horror of fear of the unknown, of not knowing what this thing is and not knowing why it exists, is the best type of horror, because you don't want to know why this thing is here. You don't want to know what its motivations are. Maybe you might want to have some vague information about it, but knowing everything about a creature, and more specifically and most importantly, like knowing how to kill a creature or the monster in a story, is probably the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, and for the most part, because in a lot of ways it takes away the uncertainty, the mystery of that thing. It takes away what makes it scary. What makes it scary is not knowing why the thing is doing what it does, why its nature, why is it here, what is it exactly, sure, you unveiling these things, in a slow manner, maybe you learn a little bit about the thing, but you don't know everything about it. There's still a lot that's unknown about it. You don't know why it's killing people, or you don't know why it's doing whatever it is it's actually doing. That is to me, is something that I feel is very much lost in a lot of modern horror movies, and a lot of modern horror, anything modern horror is just, it doesn't really, there's a lot, I don't really see this type of Lovecraftian horror that really permeates a lot of, the more mainstream movies. It mainly has to do with zombies, ghosts, or something of the sort. It doesn't really have a lot to do with this Lovecraftian idea of horror, of the fear of the unknown, and what is mainly prevalent throughout a lot of Lovecraft's work, the old gods, or these beings that exist that kind of are these powerful gods that just lord over everything and could destroy humanity if they wanted to. We are insignificant in the eyes of these things, and we basically do not matter. That's also terrifying. The fact that even though humanity does not matter in the grand scheme of things, and it is mainly terrifying because partially it's probably true. We don't matter in the grand scheme of things. In the vast universe, this infinite universe, humanity really doesn't matter. When you think about the amount of, the life elsewhere, there could be life elsewhere that is greater than us, that just by the essentially the equivalent of flicking their fingers, we could just all disappear. Maybe I unintentionally made a callback to Thanos there, but that's basically the gist of Lovecraftian horror. And because of this, and because this isn't really the kind of horror that's popular, it's more this pulpy, graphic, type of horror that's, has more to do with the undead, ghosts, or maybe even cults. Now, cults are something that is very much reminiscent of Lovecraft, but not really in the way that Lovecraft might implement cults. Lovecraft is mainly just, in my opinion, very difficult to adapt, because it's not something that a lot of people can really adapt. You're not going to have any 100% faithful adaptation of Lovecraft, and that mainly has to do with these creatures being so beyond description. You can't describe them. Now, there are vague descriptions given of the creatures, such as, these fish-like creatures that are very prevalent throughout Lovecraft's stories, that we see in the Call of Cthulhu game, or we are going to see in the new Call of Cthulhu game, and also the fish people that are pretty much everywhere in the Shadow over Innsmouth story, and also in the Call of Cthulhu games. But other than that, there are also things that are in his stories that, for the most part, it's really hard to 100% adapt it in a way that people would, look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's definitely something how I could imagine this creature looking when I read about it. A lot of the time when you read something, and of course you could say this for a lot of different stories, but your mind kind of fills in the blanks as to what this thing could possibly look like. And that's one of the attraction, or the interesting things about Lovecraft's stories. You could read his stories, and you could basically just envision what this thing could possibly look like, because you're only given, like I said, the most vague amount of information about it. So whenever I read one of Lovecraft's stories, I just kind of think about what this thing could possibly look like, because I'm not really given a lot of information about it. So I just have to kind of envision it myself. So whenever you see it on the screen, and if somebody did try to adapt from the stories, you sometimes end up being disappointed by the result. And the same is true for a lot of adaptations of books. It's just not how people imagined it when they read it. But Lovecraft in particular, because the type of horror associated with Lovecraft it's just not popular within the mainstream media. So a lot of the time you'll see independent films, or maybe not independent video games, but not really a lot of AAA game developers really trying to tackle Lovecraftian horror. The only developers I know of that try to do that have been the people behind Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth, and of course Frictional Games with the Penumbra series and with Amnesia. And of course with movies, the only really popular, or at least in my opinion somewhat well done adaptation has been Dagon. But the thing about Dagon is that Dagon was not really a direct adaptation of the source material of Dagon. The source material of Dagon is about a person washing up on a alien, basically this alien landscape, this island that's not a normal island, and it might have basically come up from the bottom of the ocean, and there's a lot of weird things that he finds on that island, including, of course, Dagon himself. But of course, that story is so short, it's like, how do you really adapt that into a movie? So the movie mainly ends up being the plot for the book, or the short story, Shadow over Innsmouth, which basically more or less follows the events that are in Dagon, but of course Dagon takes quite a few liberties, but for the most part it's a fairly decent adaptation. A lot of these adaptations in video games and in movies, they're not direct, most of the time they're not direct adaptations of Lovecraft's work. They end up being adaptations, somewhat of an adaptation of his work, but also more so its own thing because of how many liberties it ends up taking. It ends up taking more inspiration from the work of Lovecraft than actually directly adapting a story of his, which is usually the things that take inspiration from Lovecraft, I find, are the things that end up being fairly successful, I guess, Lovecraftian adaptations, and not the things that actually directly try to adapt his stories. Of course, there are exceptions there, but I find that most of the time, the things that actually take inspiration from Lovecraft are the things that end up being the most successful on-screen or in, video game adaptations of him. Not so much the just direct adaptations of his stories. But I really would like for there to be more of a push to try to popularize, or try harder to just, bring Lovecraft into a more so into big budget movies or big budget games, because like I said, you don't really see a lot of these big game developers or these big movie studios trying to take the risk and adapt either one of his works or taking a lot of inspiration from him. Now, there could be things that I'm not really, that I might have forgotten about here, that, maybe somebody did try to do that, a big studio did try to do that, but, and of course, if that's the case, you can just tell me in the comments, but As far as I know, there hasn't really been a lot of that. Like I said, it usually comes from independent studios. So I would really like to see a lot of, you know, a bigger push for that in more mainstream media, but unfortunately, it just doesn't. And I think this mainly is because Lovecraft is just such a hard thing to try to even try to adapt, because of the way his stories go and because of the way he describes these monsters, and also because, you know, they're also just so beyond description. It could just be because it's hard to put that kind of thing on screen. I can understand that. But at the same time, it might also not be popular, because that's just not the kind of horror most people, or most casuals, really seem to know about. There are a lot of people who are casuals, or who are just casual horror fans, might not even be familiar with Lovecraft and his work. You know, they might just see something like The Walking Dead or any sort of George Romero film, you know, having to do with zombies, and that might be all they really know, you know, or just any movie involving a haunted house or ghosts, like, you know, Paranormal Activity, or any of the James Wan movies like The Conjuring. I mean, that's really what people seem to know. I mean, also just the Saw movies as well. There's just a lot of, I find a lot of that to be the more popular kind of horror, you know, horror involving either dumb teenagers getting killed by some slasher, or going in, you know, a haunted house, or just zombie movies. That seems to be the main, you know, the main thing that's popular within horror media, not so much, you know, not so much Lovecraft, unfortunately. I would like to, you know, see, honestly, some more originality within horror, and taking, you know, people taking more inspiration from Lovecraft. But unfortunately, it's just not the case, and I believe the reasons why, like I said, are just, it's just not popular, and it's also just very hard to adapt Lovecraft stories to the screen or into a video game. I feel like video games might be a little bit easier because there's a lot more you could do with that. But I believe the developers like Frictional are definitely doing a pretty good job when it comes to that kind of thing. And there are certain directors like Guillermo del Toro or some other ones who could definitely do a Lovecraft type of film, you know, but I just don't know if they ever will do one. I know that Guillermo del Toro was working on apparently a Mountain Madness adaptation, but we kind of did get something like that with John Carpenter's The Thing. So I don't know. I would like to see something like that from Guillermo del Toro, but I don't know if he's ever going to do it. He's very talented with effects when it comes to you know, his monster, when it comes to him creating monsters for his movies or ghosts or anything like that. They all look very creepy because of the way they move and the way they look. I think he does put a lot of effort into that. So I would really like to see how he tackles Lovecraft, but I just don't know if we're ever going to see that. This video could just more or less be me rambling. I felt like doing a video like this, like sort of a discussion video on me just saying why I don't think we don't see a lot of really good Lovecraft adaptations. So this is just kind of my 2 cents on it. I know a lot of people have talked about this sort of thing in videos, and those videos have been more well thought out than mine, of course. But just let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like, you know, do you think we're ever going to get a really decent, like, you know, maybe high budget Lovecraft adaptation, or something that's inspired, you know, Lovecraft inspired, I guess, or if we're ever going to get, you know, or if we're just going to see maybe like a boom of Lovecraft adaptations. We have been kind of seeing that sort of with Stephen King stuff, but that's kind of died down, I think, you know, at least around the time of It. I feel like there's been, like, you know, there was a lot of planned, you know, Stephen King adaptations, such as, you know, with The Dark Tower, although that was a piece of shit, and also with the upcoming Pet Sematary remake, which I really am highly anticipating, because that book was very good, and I didn't really care too much for the 80s movie adaptation for Pet Sematary. But again, let me know your guys' thought in the comments section, and if you would like to see me make another video like this, or just a general discussion video where I guess just talk about something. I don't know. I like doing videos like this. It kind of breaks from the typical, you know, the typical video I usually do, which is either a Let's Play or an episode review. You know, I really want to do something different every once in a while. So, and of course, that being October, I felt like this was fairly appropriate. But again, let me know what you guys think, and until next time, I'll see you all later.